Games are pretty awesome. In fact, I personally believe that gaming is the most prominent form of art at the moment, seeing as how Hollywood is in the toilet and TV is something I wish would die a death. However, there are always going to be bad games, and sometimes we gotta take a look at them. Whether it's shit by accident, shit by design, if it's fucked up, fucked left, or left the fuck alone. Today, I'm looking at some shit games, in no particular order. Brink is a game that was so full of potential, and if it had have been pulled off with any sense of tact and skill, it could have been the precursor to the unbelievably popular multiplayer team-based hero shooter genre, but unfortunately, Brink was executed horribly. The game was advertised to feature a movement system that was taking inspiration from games like Mirror's Edge and Assassin's Creed, games that featured a great blend between parkour and combat. And while I have no doubt the parkour element would have been really cool in a game like this, it doesn't really matter what I think because it seems like they forgot to fucking add it. For one, the levels aren't designed in the fucking slightest for any special movement system, as they seem to lack any cool props to parkour on or off of, and the parkour system basically does nothing but vault over knee-high walls for you, removing any real need for cover in the game or actually letting players control it in any way. The weapon selection is a decent size and offers at least some variety, but really isn't anything to write home about because the time to kill in this game is so long that even with the most powerful weapons on the roster, there's still amount to nothing. I understand that in any online game you don't want it to be first see, first kill, but that doesn't mean you need to effectively preeminently nerf every weapon before release. The game modes don't have any variety, usually seeing you being forced into a choke point on a level and getting down 40 times before the right operator class does what they're supposed to, like crouching in front of a door for 50 seconds or the time on the timer runs down. And don't get me started on the story. I'm probably the first person in years to think about the story with even any amount of detail, after the game was rightfully forgotten. And trust me, this means that I have thought about the story more than the devs ever did. It's a bland government versus rebellion story that doesn't really lead into anything, and choosing a side has no real effect on gameplay as both sides have access to the exact same arsenal of weapons, the only difference being that one side wears slightly scuffier shirts. Utter shit.
Samangari
This game genuinely encapsulates all of the things I hate about bad games, and the fact that it got a PlayStation Essentials re-release is fucking tragic. Sniper Ghost Warrior is seizure-inducing to look at, the models are blocky, everything looks like it's been covered in grease which I can guarantee has been done to hide the awful texture work on display. But that is nothing on the fact that the engine seemingly has to fight itself to prioritise lighting, as the gun model that you're using will begin to inexplicably fade out of fucking existence anytime you step out into the open. The enemies are complete robots, seemingly constantly knowing your exact position and snapping to you because the stealth in this game is fucked to hell and back. The game lacks any real game mechanics, and outside of halfway decent voice acting, the story is snooze-worthy at the very least. This game feels like a mobile game. It feels like the developers took pre-made assets, chucking them into an engine that couldn't handle it all, and called it a day. The game even uses stock music from free download websites, including songs that are commonly used on YouTube channels. One of the specific songs is the intro song of the Bad Creepypasta series on the Michael Leroy channel. Just an interesting detail that I noticed there that had me shitting myself laughing when I realised it. But the worst thing about this game isn't all of those details I just mentioned. It's the fact that even if I wanted to complete this game, I couldn't, because of a glitch that stopped me from proceeding past the 3rd level. Fucking unacceptable. The fact that this game sold for any money at one point is awful, and whilst I don't think Sony would ever think about this game, ever, nor do I think anyone that worked on it would want to remember that they did, would it have killed them to patch it at least once? Shit. The Saw franchise has been desecrated many times over the years, but the worst offence is Saw 2: Flesh and Blood. The first game was nothing to write home about, but it did at least give us an acceptable title for what it was worth. A decent look into the Saw universe with some good acting from Tobin Bell and some story beats for fans that was satisfying for someone who really likes the early movies. Flesh and Blood, on the other hand, was so obviously released in an unfinished state. Either that or no one had any hope for it, as it was shit out by Konami. Everything that was decent about the first game has been completely cut out, just like you'd cut out an eye to grab a key resting behind it. Everything from the visuals to the exploration and even the gameplay has been butchered beyond belief. The combat from the first game was a clunkfest that required you to switch constantly into a fight stance and was a slow and broken stopwatch of an experience. In this game, however, combat isn't even a thing, as they've replaced the combat with quick time events. Great. The world design is bullshit and leaves no chances for any horror to ensue. The story is the only thing with any potential, but the ending of the game is dictated by the most menial choices, leading to the death of important figures in the game feeling completely brain dead, as their choices don't seem to mean shit. The first game must have sold alright enough to justify this game's existence, but all I have to ask is what the fuck happened that led to this big of a fuck up? You've already done all of this before. How did you fuck it up so bad the second time? I would have expected the first game to be like this, and the second game to be what the first game was. Improvements over the fuck ups you made the first time. Everything is demonstrably worse in the second game, which just hurts my fucking brain to think about. In all seriousness, I do feel bad for the dev team over at Anchor, as this game is the perfect example of a developer not being given the required amount of time to finish a project. Raw on the original Xbox is a game that genuinely features some groundbreaking content for the time. Some of those features would even be included in newer wrestling titles and heralded as iconic new features that had never been seen before. when in reality they were featured on the original Xbox. But ironically, the game fails the most when it comes to its feature set. Just like a 2015 Roman Reigns Brock Lesnar WrestleMania match, the moveset on display is lacking. First of all, the match list is so short and features no special matches. There's no arena selection feature, and as a whole there's no season mode or story to speak of. The worst offender, of course, is the gameplay. I can forgive games with small feature sets. One of my favourite wrestling games is Rumble Roses, and that game has less features than a failing SoundCloud rapper. But I love that game because it's fucking awesome. Raw's gameplay is so monotonous that it feels like we're playing a pre-alpha build of a wrestling game. The grapples take ages and the hits don't connect very often, and it plays so disgruntlingly slow that it's a slog to play through even 3 concurrent matches. Unlike the 2 previous titles, I don't feel hate for this game. Instead, I just feel bad that this game turned out as poor as it did. The game has undeniable potential, its graphics are quite good, and it has decent presentation, but it's just such a shame it failed to succeed due to time constraints and most likely developer and, publisher stepping in and making decisions that completely changed the way the game went during its production. What a shame. Capcom metaphorically rubbed their ballsack in our faces with the release of Street Fighter V. The game released in such a damn near unfinished state that even IGN, the provocateurs of arse-licking, couldn't even completely suck up to this train wreck, having to admit it fails in many vital areas. And even after years on the market and multi-hundreds of updates, I still hate it to this day. Sure, when you get onto it, the game doesn't feel that bad and it can even provide some decent fun if you boot it up with some friends, but outside of that, on a balance level, Street Fighter V has not even contended as a decent game in my opinion. For one, half the fucking roster isn't even featured in the game from the beginning. Working towards buying a character through the laughably short and bare-bones character story mode will take ages of playing as completely forgettable J-Brones in order to work towards buying a character you actually like. And what's even more egregious is that if you just did what Capcom wanted and bought the entire roster, spending $30 to unlock the band of ass-fuckers you actually care about, well, let me just tell you what happened to me. I bought the pack from the PlayStation Store, waited for 10 minutes for what I expected was going to be a download, only to find out when I actually moved over to the arcade mode, all the characters were already accessible without a download. So you're telling me this game was purposely stopping me from selecting my beautiful baby Juri Han, not because the game was broken, but because Capcom effectively wanted me to buy a fucking working menu screen. No download was required. The game just said, okay, yeah, now you can choose this character you like. Well, fuck me, Capcom. Would you like me to buy a fucking working lobby system too? Because Capcom Fighters Network is shit! Instead of working like the far superior Tekken 7 and just using the fucking PlayStation Network, Street Fighter requires that your friend friends you through Street Fighter instead, and to do that you have to navigate the ass backwards lobbies to try and find their fight tag. Get the fuck out of here, Ono, you motherfucker! The fact that anyone takes this game seriously after all these years, and it seems to only now be getting on track, is hilarious to me. I don't give a fuck if the story add-on's free. The game released with no story to speak of outside of the slim as fuck character stories. Fuck, Eminem would be fucking jealous of how slim the fucking stories in this game were when it released. Even with those, anyone with a semi-decent knowledge of fighters would breeze through them in no time at all. Street Fighter V is a complete abortion of the fighting game genre and should have never even been taken seriously from the beginning, especially when games like Guilty Gear were completely destroying its 2D semi 2.5D looking ass bullshit with better visuals, better gameplay, more balanced online gameplay, and netcode that wasn't developed by someone that didn't have fucking hands. Street Fighter V is a game that should be forgotten, and I only ever install it when my friends want to have a bash, and even when we do get on, it barely fucking works properly then. Fuck Ono, fuck fucking Fighter Tag, fuck the Fighters Network, and fuck Street Fighter V. Go fuck yourself.